You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner. Images of injured women with black eyes, burns and torn out piercings have been used in a fashion magazine's photo shoot about beauty. In the pictures, glamorous models look as though they've been attacked by sharp implements, burned, or in one case, with her throat slashed. These beautiful but artificially disfigured women are wearing jewellery and clothing by Valentino, Galdini, H&M and the Bulgarian label Kapaska. The disturbing photos in the Bulgarian magazine 12 have been condemned as perverse and troubling by domestic violence charity workers. The pictures mimic advertising in the late 1980s, where many featured women who were abused, bound and gagged. Joining me to discuss the glamorization of violence against women in advertising is Huben Hubenov, the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian fashion magazine 12, which published the photos. Julie Bindel is a journalist, feminist and the co-founder of the group Justice for Women. Alison Meldrum is from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. And Sofia Shershinovich is a fashion journalist. I'm going to start with you, Huben Hubenov, the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian fashion magazine 12. Why did you publish these photos?
Well, the photos was intended to represent the work of mostly of Daniela Avramova, the special effects makeup artist, and it will be accompanied by a video that we're going to release soon, showing exactly how it's made. In terms of why, it's why not? I mean, it's nothing worse than any horror movie or, like Joker smiling Batman or something like that, It's just pictures, It's just, you don't have to look for deeper meaning in terms of violence, in terms of abuse or whatever,
Alison Meldrum, you're from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. These are like nothing else, is what Herben's saying. Is this very similar to what you would see in a horror movie? Do you accept that?
Not really. I think that these images are not only dodgy art, they're even dodgier advertising. The point of advertising is to sell stuff, to help consumers make a close correlation between the product and the brand. And these don't. They're not selling anything except criminality. And the way they portray women is, I think, very distressing because it's art, all right, but art is, in our society, is like holding up a mirror to ourselves. And what I see in this inverted commas art is a hideously distorted fairground mirror that is the stuff of nightmares.
Julie Bindel, you're a journalist, feminist and the co-founder of the group Justice for Women. What are your thoughts about these disturbing photos?
I think they're horrific, and I think we need to look at fashion in a wider sense. There has been, over the years, some really awful portrayals of women who've been battered, bruised and beaten in advertising, but also we need to look at fashion designers such as the late Alexander McQueen, who had a whole collection entitled Highland Rape, where women looked, for all intents and purposes, as though they had been raped and beaten in the bushes. Now, this isn't all right, but then you also have to look at the misogyny that isn't quite as blatant. For example, why do so many male fashion designers invent clothing and shoes that cause women pain on an everyday, regular basis? The shoes which distorts the way that women walk, which leaves them with permanent back injuries, the corsets, which can cause internal injuries, and all kinds of neck braces and sadomasochistic fashion wear, which gives the impression that women enjoy being hurt. So it's not just this collection, which actually does show women portrayed as though they've been beaten up and, of course, enjoying it, and, of course, therefore, glamorizing it. But it's all the rest of the industry that feeds into an awful frenzy about women having to look like prepubescent children, those that walk around, size 00, for example, with barely any flesh on their bones. All of this contributes to a portrayal of women as though they are nothing but objects to be ridiculed and abused.
Hubenov, some very strong words there by Julie Bindel. This is very similar to the heroin chic campaign. It's basically a new version, some are saying. The row in Britain in the 1990s, when photographers used skinny models made to look as though they were on drugs. You seem to be copying that same thing. And as Julie is saying, portraying women as objects of sexual satisfaction and degrading them.
Well, I personally think that in a way they're both right, but I think they're giving too much meaning in fashion. I mean, in general, fashion are just clothes, and all those images and shock factor are just in terms of fashion, they're probably mostly made to sell or to shock or to provoke attention. In terms of what the other girl said earlier, it's not advertising what we did, and it's just fashion editorial, which is supposed to present the work of professionals. So I really don't believe that anybody seeing these images or the other violence imagery in fashion photography in general, it's a deeper meaning. It's just a picture at the end.
Sofia Shashinovic, you're a fashion journalist. Herben's just saying fashion is just clothes. We're giving this way too much meaning. Is that an acceptable argument for you?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to disagree. I believe that a lot of designers see themselves as artists. And for instance, Alexandra McQueen clearly was trying to portray some kind of a message or a theme, as well as designers during London Fashion Week right now, like Charlie Lemindu, who's sending out models completely naked, not a hair on their body, covered in pig's blood. With the word violence attached to their head. Clearly he's trying to say something with that message. I was actually going to ask Huben if he knows if there's a message in that photo shoot, because it seems to me personally like it's not about domestic violence, it's actually about crime against women, like violent crimes like rape, or if one of them looks like she's been burglarized, like her earrings have been torn out and stolen, or the one that had her mouth slashed open like the Joker, that doesn't look like domestic violence, it just looks like some kind of sick psycho killer has done that to her. So perhaps there's actually a different message in this photo shoot. Is there, was it inspired by something else? I'm just curious.
We let those images empty, without any meaning, without any explanation, so that anybody can implement their own meaning. So yes, they are portraying strong women, and you can see it by looking in their eyes. That they're confident, they're strong, and they're despite all the wounds on their faces and neck and whatever, they're not abused. They're not victims. They're not sad women that have problems or whatever, and they made up, they're beautifully made up. So no, there is no deeper meaning. I said that before, and I will say it's just a photo shoot that represents the work of the photographers and the makeup artists.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner with today's discussion on the glamorization of violence against women in advertising. Joining me is Hubenov, the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian fashion magazine 12. Julie Bindel is a journalist, feminist and co-founder of the group Justice for Women. Alison Meldrum is from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. And Sofia Shashinovic is a fashion journalist. Alison Meldrum, you're from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. These pictures are clearly shocking. But when we see them, could it have a positive effect on your campaigns against domestic violence? You look at the photos and you are completely shocked by what you see. The pictures of women with piercings torn out, having acid thrown on them and being burned. But is there a way where it could end up helping your campaign?
I really don't think so in the least. I think when we objectify women And when we deny them their basic humanity, and I'm saying this as a humanist, not a feminist, I think this sort of stuff degrades both men and women. And I think it's a short step from seeing women as half human and ripe for violence, seeing their bodies used in these doll-like broken forms, to the actual corpses. And I suppose my question to Huben is, what do you do for an encore? A snuff movie?
It's not going to be taken anywhere. As I said, you're taking this too serious. I mean, I really believe that you're taking this too serious.
And I really wish you would sit down with some of the women that we work for, and then you would see what they go through. I'd also like to ask you how you would feel if your own mother, sister, lover, close female friend wound up in that state. Would you not make a causal connection between what you had...
You don't know if they didn't already, You don't know that.
So you would not.
Sorry,
so if some hideously violent incident occurred to some female who was close to you, you would not consider what you are perpetuating in this magazine to have anything to do with that outcome for that woman.
No, we don't have to do anything with that, because it's these things happen. It's not provoked by imagery. It's not reflected by it. They just happen. It's sad, but I honestly think that these pictures are not going to provoke any more violence or feel. I guess that there are people who've been abused who feel bad, but there are also others who say that these pictures make them feel okay, and they see that even an abused woman can still look beautiful and confident and everything. As I said, this is way too much meaning you put in these pictures.
Huben, it's about dignity, and there is no dignity in these photos.
I want to bring in Julie Bindel
Do you honestly believe that? Do you honestly believe that? You have to look at the faces of the girls. They are dignified. Trust me.
I want to bring in Julie Bindel here. You're the co-founder of the group Justice for Women. Do these photos normalise domestic violence and glamorise violence against women?
Of course they do. Violence against women as entertainment always makes the problem worse. I don't think that a man would see the images in the magazine and decide to go out and beat a woman. Not at all. But two things happen. One is it desensitizes us to the horrific violence that women endure. And two, it actually entertains people, which is a gross insult to the victims of violence. And in fact, your guest mentioned earlier that the slash marks on the face of one of the models doesn't look like a domestic violence incident. It looks like a sick psycho killer, I quote. But actually many men do kill women who they're violent to. Many men do slash their faces and their bodies, put them in hospital and murder them. We have 2 victims of murder related to domestic violence every week in Great Britain, and we also have many, many more. For example, Russia is a country with the highest rates of domestic homicide in the world. Now, what Huben said absolutely shocked me to my core about how these are just images. It's meaningless. You're taking them too seriously. How does Huben then think advertising works? How does he think that certain images make somebody want to go out and buy a soft drink or a car? It's ridiculous to suggest that images don't actually give a subliminal or even direct
message. But this is not advertising. This is not advertising. This is not advertising.
But it's imagery.
Of the makeup artist.
But Huben, if I could finish, it's imagery in a commercial magazine with advertising, with many people who you are trying to actually get to advertise with you for your revenue. And you cannot pretend that there is no correlation between imagery that's used in a commercial magazine and those...
It's a voluntarily non-profit project that is only online.
Huben might just be thinking, well, fashion magazines often aim to shock just like any other type of media, and it just sells magazines. There may not be any other thought about it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And of course, this is what we all do in terms of the imagery that we use when we're trying to get people to really grasp onto our message, whether it's a good message or whether it's a message that causes harm. But I would ask Huben this. If it's just out to shock, why is it that fashion continually uses the images of harmed and abused women? Why, for example, don't you use an image, and God forbid that you do, of a black man hanging from a tree who's been lynched by a load of white racists? Why don't you use imagery which is racist in its connotation or images of men who've been battered, raped and abused.
Hubin, what's stopping magazines doing that?
Well, I think fashion uses imagery of, abused women or, just violence against them because mostly fashion is oriented towards women. And it's normal if you want to show a dress to use a woman, not a man, And I don't think that the racial card is well played here because why would we want to do that? It's completely different than showing a beautiful woman with a fake wound.
But it's not that they've got fake wounds, is it?
In these pictures, that's fake.
Human, it's not that they've got fake wounds. It's picturing them as if they were real. This is glamorizing domestic violence.
That have been made up by a makeup artist. This is very different. We are showing women that have beauty makeup done by one makeup artist and special effects makeup done by another. This is completely different. This is a showcase of their work,
I think you're being very disingenuous. I think you're being very disingenuous, Hubin. I think you have to put this in a larger context. You have to look at it in the context of pornography, the skyrocketing consumption of pornography amongst young men, the expectation that women will conform to sex as a performance as opposed to something they should actually enjoy, and God help them get any fun out of it. And so I think for you just to say that this exists in a hermetically sealed bubble is disingenuous at best and cynical at worst.
Having a look on the magazine's website under the comments of these photos, one user wrote, "To me this is amazing. While some may think that this glamorizes violence, to me it says, while a woman can be scarred, she can in fact still be beautiful." You're taking this as a negative connotation. This reader is taking it as a very positive connotation for them. Can we separate the two?
I don't think the results of violence under any circumstances can be considered beautiful. What we are looking at is the artistic impression of the aftermath of a crime. And anything that glorifies criminality is clearly sending an absolutely catastrophic message to people who already sit at home in their bedrooms playing violent video games all too much of the time. It is all of a piece.
Hubanov, taking into account this comment, do you think that this type of photography can empower women?
I think so, yeah. I think so. And I also don't think that, seeing these images, watching a horror movie or playing a violent video game would make anyone more violent than he already is, or she, or whatever. Just violence is not provoked by viewing it,
In sufficient quantities, it can be.
Let's bring in Sofia Shoshinovich, you're a fashion journalist. Hubin is basically saying that these photos are nothing more than clothing and it won't incite people to commit violence. They are just photos. It's just art for him.
They're just entertainment, right? I mean, I do understand the point that it is just like a movie. It is just entertainment value. I think that's a valid point. However, I think that there's a very valid point to bring up here, which is everybody involved has achieved exactly what they wanted. They've been catapulted to fame by doing this photo shoot, which was exactly the point. It's exactly what Alexander McQueen did. It's exactly what Charlie Lumindo is doing right now at Fashion Week. And it's exactly what 12 magazine has done for Vasil Germanov, who is the photographer, whose name is, it's world known right now. So I'm just saying that what they have done with this project, it's actually completely worked.
Can we ever appreciate art as just for art's sake, or has there always got to be a deeper meaning? Has there always got to be something in that?
Any artist would tell you that there's a deeper meaning behind his work. He's always interviewed about the inspiration, artists and designers. The first question that every designer gets asked right after his show, what was the inspiration? There's always inspiration. That means there is a deeper meaning. Well, maybe he's not trying to portray some kind of a message, but he's definitely trying to provoke a reaction. And in this case, I think the reaction that was trying to be provoked here was just, notice me.
Hubin thought that these photos empower women. Do you agree with that?
I'm sorry, but I can't unfortunately agree with that. I don't think it empowers women at all. I can't say that it degrades them either. I do look at it as a sort of a PR stunt, I'm afraid. That's how I see it. I don't think it's about violence about women here. I don't think it's about, maybe even about art or fashion. I think it's about PR.
It's a cynical PR stunt. You nailed it, definitely.
But Alison, would you be reacting differently if these were photos of men that had these injuries?
No, I would have exactly the same view. We should not be glamorizing violence. Violence shows humanity at its most bestial, at its most inability to communicate. And to me, art is about communication. The fact that we as humans can form emotional bonds with each other is what separates us from the beasts in the field. And these sort of imagery, to me, I think they are beastly images in all senses of the word. It degrades all of us, men and women alike.
Would we not have quite a sterile environment if every image of violence was removed from any type of material?
That's a very good point. I myself do not play violent video games, but I know that there's an audience out there. I'm not suggesting that everything be sanitized. The problem about domestic violence is it's a private crime. As Julie pointed out, 2 women per week lose their lives in the UK at the hands of a current or former intimate partner. Imagine if we extrapolated that into the public realm. Imagine that if that happened at a football match or at a shopping mall. My God, the papers would be full of it. But because it's a private crime behind closed doors, that's another aspect that we haven't touched upon, that domestic violence is very much a hidden crime. And if we're drawing attention to domestic violence in a way that is aesthetically valid and strategically sound, I'm all for it. But this is just a PR stunt.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner with today's discussion on the glamorization of violence against women in advertising. Joining me is Huben Hubenov, the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian fashion magazine 12. Julie Bindel is a journalist, feminist and co-founder of the group Justice for Women. Alison Meldrum is from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. And Sofia Shashinovich is a fashion journalist. Julie Bindel, Alison Meldrum said that domestic violence is a hidden crime, but surely these photos bring it right to the forefront. They put it right in front of the public, and people can be shocked and they can go, right, this is definitely not okay, and act upon it.
I'm all for us seeing images of the aftermath of domestic violence. I'm all for us seeing really good public awareness campaigns that show what happens to the abusers if they do hit, rape, beat women, abuse children. And I'm all for the survivors of domestic violence speaking out about how they were able to resist further victimization. However, it's not actually glamorous to show women in a refuge. It's not glamorous to show women who are struggling to get the police to listen to their story. And the way that it's been portrayed in this magazine isn't about, let's look at the effects of domestic violence. Not at all. It's using imagery of violence against women, including serious, grievous bodily harm, to titillate and to amuse and to advertise clothing. Now, obviously, Huben talked about how his magazine is not commercial, so therefore they're not there to make money. But they're certainly there to make its mark. And I think if we're going to portray violence against women as something that really educates the public, it's certainly not going to be in the pages of a fashion magazine advertising the latest designs.
Hubenov, have you got a reaction to what Julie just said?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I also said that, risking domestic violence and those and victimizing and everything, if we wanted to do that, we would actually see women who've been abused and talk to them, and, this is not in any way related to domestic violence. It was not in our ideas. So it is also not a PR stunt, because all this national attention was not brought by us. It was brought by people who saw that editorial and made it international. It is not a thing we were expecting or were planning. So in terms of saying that abused women that does not have a place on the pages of a fashion magazine, I don't think that's true. And if we wanted to do that, we would. But it just wasn't our idea. It was our idea to showcase the work of those people who did this editorial. That's just
You've obviously said that these pictures empower women. You're quite happy with the fact that you published them. What's the next step for 12? Would you republish these photos if given the opportunity, or now that you've seen the public backlash, you wouldn't do it?
Oh yes, absolutely, I will. I still find these photos very beautiful. I still find the makeup work exquisite, and I would publish them again, even if I knew the backlash and all the international attention to it. I'm not ashamed of these photos.
Here's an idea for you, Hubin. Why don't you rerun those photos and juxtapose it with interviews with women who've actually suffered domestic violence and have been brutalised and have had their lives turned upside down? And I think it would be very interesting to see their response to them.
I think so too, and we might do this in the future. We're not violent people. We are very pacifistic, and we are against any kind of violence. And it is not our place to be that social, responsive. And we are a fashion magazine. We're superficial, if you want to say it. I don't know. We just never thought of actually portraying, abused women. If we wanted that, we would call them and we would talk to them and we would tell their story. It's an idea in the future, but it wasn't an idea to do this with these photos.
You mentioned that fashion magazines are superficial, Hubin, that you can kind of separate yourself the makeup from the meaning of the photos that Alison and Julie and Sophia are taking from them.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we have a niche publication that, it's targeted more towards people that are in fashion, that are in the industry, and they are fascinated by the work that's been put into those pictures. In a way, we are superficial because when you work in the fashion industry, you tend to think about clothes, about trends, about makeup trends, about the hair of the model and everything, and you just sometimes don't stop to think if things mean more. I find it that way, yeah.
That's
but it's the problem of the industry. It's not our problem at all. I mean, it's our problem, but it's a problem of the industry as a whole, worldwide.
Alison, you actually worked in advertising before working for Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. Do we have to understand in a way that this is what fashion magazines do to sell their pictures and to sell their magazines? Or on the other side, do we now have to say, look, this is not acceptable at all. We can never ever show any violent pictures in any magazines?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is advertising is there to sell product. It's there to help consumers make a causal connection between the product and the brand through which it is projected. Now, if I look at a fashion brand like, say, Duncan Quinn makes very upscale men's suits. They ran a series of ads with a woman lying on the bonnet of a car, blood under her head, in her underwear, and she has been held by a knotted tie by a man standing behind her in a very beautiful bespoke suit. Now, what on earth does this have to do with fashion? It's just simply egregiously irrelevant. And it's bad advertising because it doesn't sell product. I mean, it's like something out of Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho. Nobody's going to look at that ad unless they were the character in that novel and say, oh, I'm going to go out and buy a Duncan Quinn suit. So it doesn't actually work in terms of selling the stuff it's supposed to sell.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, thanks to my guest, Hubin Hubinov, the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian fashion magazine 12, which published the photos. Julie Bindel is a journalist, feminist and co-founder of the group Justice for Women. Alison Meldrum is from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. And Sophia Shershinovich is a fashion journalist. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner. Images of injured women with black eyes, burns and torn out piercings have been used in a fashion magazine's photo shoot about beauty. In the pictures, glamorous models look as though they've been attacked by sharp implements, burned, or in one case, with her throat slashed. These beautiful but artificially disfigured women are wearing jewellery and clothing by Valentino, Galdini, H&M and the Bulgarian label Kapaska. The disturbing photos in the Bulgarian magazine 12 have been condemned as perverse and troubling by domestic violence charity workers. The pictures mimic advertising in the late 1980s, where many featured women who were abused, bound and gagged. Joining me to discuss the glamorization of violence against women in advertising is Huben Hubenov, the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian fashion magazine 12, which published the photos. Julie Bindel is a journalist, feminist and the co-founder of the group Justice for Women. Alison Meldrum is from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. And Sofia Shershinovich is a fashion journalist. I'm going to start with you, Huben Hubenov, the editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian fashion magazine 12. Why did you publish these photos?
Well, the photos was intended to represent the work of mostly of Daniela Avramova, the special effects makeup artist, and it will be accompanied by a video that we're going to release soon, showing exactly how it's made. In terms of why, it's why not? I mean, it's nothing worse than any horror movie or, like Joker smiling Batman or something like that, It's just pictures, It's just, you don't have to look for deeper meaning in terms of violence, in terms of abuse or whatever,
Alison Meldrum, you're from the charity Standing Together Against Domestic Violence. These are like nothing else, is what Herben's saying. Is this very similar to what you would see in a horror movie? Do you accept that?
Not really. I think that these images are not only dodgy art, they're even dodgier advertising. The point of advertising is to sell stuff, to help consumers make a close correlation between the product and the brand. And these don't. They're not selling anything except criminality. And the way they portray women is, I think, very distressing because it's art, all right, but art is in our society is like holding up a mirror to ourselves. And what I see in this inverted commas art is a hideously distorted
way that women walk, which leaves them with permanent back injuries, the corsets, which can cause internal injuries, and all kinds of neck braces and sadomasochistic fashion wear, which gives the impression that women enjoy being hurt. So it's not just this collection, which actually does show women portrayed as though they've been beaten up and, of course, enjoying it, and, of course, therefore, glamorizing it. But it's all the rest of the industry that feeds into an awful frenzy about women having to look like prepubescent children, those that walk around, size 00, for example, with barely any flesh on their bones. All of this contributes to a portrayal of women as though they are nothing but objects to be ridiculed and abused.
Huben Hubenov, some very strong words there by Julie Bindel. This is very similar to the heroin chic campaign. It's basically a new version, some are saying. The row in Britain in the 19th...
fairground mirror that is the stuff of nightmares.
Julie Bindel, you're a journalist, feminist and the co-founder of the group Justice for Women. What are your thoughts about these disturbing photos?
I think they're horrific, and I think we need to look at fashion in a wider sense. There has been, over the years, some really awful portrayals of women who've been battered, bruised and beaten in advertising, but also we need to look at fashion designers such as the late Alexander McQueen, who had a whole collection entitled Highland Rape, where women looked, for all intents and purposes, as though they had been raped and beaten in the bushes. Now, this isn't all right, but then you also have to look at the misogyny that isn't quite as blatant. For example, why do so many male fashion designers invent clothing and shoes that cause women pain on an everyday, regular basis? The shoes which distorts the